Hello, and welcome back to Forgotten Ties. Sometimes the things we think we know about our lives are just carefully constructed stories, built to hide a truth so deep and so painful that it could shatter everything. Tonight, we're not going to be talking about a ghost or a monster in the dark. We're going to talk about something far more chilling: the secrets family keeps. Our story begins in a quiet, unassuming town in the heart of Maine, the kind of place where everyone knows your name, and you can practically hear the secrets whispering on the wind. As here we meet a man named Arthur Vance. Arthur wasn't what you'd call a hero. He was a simple man, a carpenter, with hands calloused from years of working with wood. He had a kind face, a thick head of salt and pepper hair, and a laugh that, when you heard it, made you want to smile. Arthur had a life that seemed normal. He was happily married to a woman named Alara, a librarian with a quiet demeanor and eyes that held the wisdom of 1,000 books. They had 2 children, a daughter named Clara who was studying law at a prestigious university, and a son, Leo, who had just started his own tech company. Their life was a tapestry of suburban bliss, woven with school plays, summer barbecues, and the gentle rhythm of a life well lived. But every tapestry has a loose thread, a single tiny flaw that, if tugged, can unravel the entire thing. For Arthur, that thread was a box. Not just any box, but a small, unassuming wooden chest that sat on a high shelf in the back of his deceased mother's closet. His mother, Eleanor Vance, was a stern, private woman. She had been gone for nearly a year, and Arthur and his sister Beatrice were finally going through her things. A grim task filled with the bittersweet nostalgia of old photographs and forgotten memories. Beatrice, a no-nonsense woman with a sharp bob and an even sharper wit, was handling most of the sorting. She was pragmatic, efficient, and wanted nothing more than to be done with the whole ordeal. The box was what caught Arthur's eye. It was old, probably an antique, and it was locked. "That thing's been there forever," Beatrice said, not even looking up from a pile of old linens. "Mom never let anyone touch it. Said it was full of old nonsense." But something about the way she said it, a slight tremor in her voice, made Arthur's curiosity stir. He remembered his mother's frantic, almost panicked reaction whenever he or Beatrice had even looked in the direction of that shelf. It was the only thing in the house that had been off-limits, a silent fortress in a sea of open and accessible memories. After Beatrice left for the day, complaining about the dust and the sentimental baggage, Arthur went back. He climbed a small stepladder and carefully, reverently, took the box down. It was surprisingly heavy, and he could feel a faint vibration, as if the wood itself held a silent hum of a long-buried secret. The lock was simple, a small brass clasp that yielded to a gentle pry with a flathead screwdriver. The sound it made, a soft, almost whispered click, seemed to echo in the silent house, a death knell for the tranquility of his past. Inside, the box wasn't filled with jewels or money. It was filled with papers, old letters yellowed and brittle with age, a small, tarnished silver locket, and on top of it all a single hand-decorated birthday card. It was clearly old, its colors faded to pastel whispers. The front was decorated with a hand-drawn illustration of a small, cheerful-looking boy, and the handwriting on the card, in a delicate, elegant cursive, was unmistakably his mother's. He flipped it open, his heart pounding in his chest. The words were simple, yet they hit him with the force of a physical blow. "To my dearest Arthur, on your 5th birthday, I hope you have a day filled with joy, and that your brother has a day just as happy." Arthur's breath hitched. Your brother? He had no brother. He was an only son. The card was clearly addressed to him, his name scrawled in that familiar, slanted handwriting. He read it again, and again, the words blurring before his eyes. "And that your brother has a day just as happy." It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. It was a secret, a sibling he never knew existed, a brother. A cold dread began to coil in his stomach. The card was dated to a time he remembered clearly, his own 5th birthday party, the one where his mother seemed more distant, more distracted than usual. He had always dismissed it as her being stressed about the party. But now, a new, sinister possibility formed in his mind. The date on the card was his birthday, but the sentiment was directed not just at him, but at someone else. Someone hidden. Someone forgotten. He pulled out the other papers. There were medical records from a hospital he didn't recognize, dated decades before his birth. There were birth certificates. And then he saw it. A birth certificate with his mother's name on it, but with a different father. And a different name for the child. A boy, born just a few years before him. The name was redacted, or perhaps just smudged beyond recognition. But the dates were undeniable. He found a second card, this one for his 10th birthday. This one was simpler, with a single line of text. I hope you like your present, and I hope he likes his too. The word he was underlined. Underlined with a harsh, decisive stroke. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate act of concealment. His mother, the woman he had adored, the rock of his family, had kept a child from him. And not just from him, but from the world. A brother. A sibling whose existence was erased. A ghost in the family tree. The tranquility of his life, his happy marriage, his beautiful children. All of it suddenly felt like a house of cards, built on a foundation of sand. The whispered secrets of the past were no longer whispers. They were a roar, and they were just beginning to be heard. The world tilted on its axis for Arthur Vance. The air in his mother's house, once thick with the scent of nostalgia and dust, now felt heavy with deceit. He sat on the floor, the faded birthday cards and brittle documents spread around him like an arcane, cruel puzzle. His mind, the mind of a simple carpenter, was trying to make sense of something incomprehensible. A brother, a ghost, a secret so carefully guarded it had survived decades of silence and the grave itself. He held the second card in his hands. He, just 2 letters, but they screamed 1,000 questions. Who was he? Where was he? Was he still alive? Arthur's thoughts raced. A whirlwind of fear and a burgeoning, desperate need for answers. He couldn't go to Alara, not yet. Not until he had some kind of handle on this. What would he even say? Honey, my mother had another son and kept him a secret for 60 years? It sounded insane, like a plot from a pulp novel. He needed to find out more, to find the man behind the cards, before he could share this with anyone. He went back to the box, sifting through the remaining papers. He found a small, leather-bound diary, its pages filled with his mother's elegant cursive. He recognized the dates. They spanned a period before he was born, and the entries were sparse at first, then more frequent. The tone was guarded, but the emotion was raw. His mother, Eleanor, was a different woman in these pages. A young woman, scared and alone. The first entry, dated 2 years before his birth, spoke of a man named Silas. A man she had met during her brief, rebellious stint living in the city. He was a musician, a poet, and, from the sound of it, the one true love of her life. The entries were filled with a passionate, desperate love. He loved her too, the diary claimed. Their love was a whirlwind, a fleeting, beautiful storm. Then the tone shifted. The entries became frantic, filled with a terrible anxiety. He learned that Silas had died. Not from an illness or an accident, but from a fatal car crash. The diary described his mother's utter devastation, her world shattered. And then, a new kind of entry appeared. Quiet, terrified one. She was pregnant, with Silas's child. Her family, the proud and conservative Vance, would never accept this. A child born out of wedlock, the child of a dead, penniless musician. It was a scandal that would have ruined them all. He read on, his hands trembling. His mother, alone and terrified, had made a terrible choice. She had given the child up for adoption. The diary entries about this period were heartbreaking. She wrote of the emptiness in her arms, the quiet sobs that racked her body late at night. But then, a flicker of something else appeared. A note from a woman named Rebecca, the adoption social worker. The entries revealed a shocking twist. Rebecca, who had seen his mother's despair, had secretly arranged for the baby to be adopted by a couple who lived in the next town over. A couple she knew, a kind, childless pair who were desperate for a baby boy. The diary mentioned a name, the Harrisons. She had arranged it so Eleanor could, from a distance, see her son grow up. The entries from then on were a chronicle of a secret life. His mother would write about her son, the one she called My Star, a name that was never used in front of Arthur. She would describe seeing him at the local market or at a baseball game. The diary entries were filled with a fierce, possessive love, a love she could never show. She wrote about his first steps, his first lost tooth, his high school graduation. All of it, a secret life, running parallel to her real one. The name of the boy wasn't mentioned, but the dates were precise. He was 2 years older than Arthur. And a thought, a horrifying, sickening thought, began to form in Arthur's mind. He remembered a family in the next town over, the Harrisons. Mr. Harrison was a quiet man, a mechanic who owned the local garage. Mrs. Harrison was a kind, elderly woman who often volunteered at the church. And they had a son who was a few years older than him, a son named Julian Harrison. Arthur's heart froze. Julian was a tall, lanky boy with a shock of dark, curly hair. He remembered him from high school. Julian had been a bit of a loner, a quiet, introspective boy who had a remarkable talent for drawing. He had even drawn the picture on the front of his 5th birthday card. Arthur's blood ran cold. He had never made the connection. Why would he? But now, the details rushed back, a flood of repressed memories. He and Julian had been in the same art class in their junior year of high school. They were in a small group working on a project. He remembered Julian talking about his childhood, about a quiet, mysterious woman who would sometimes send him birthday cards. She would sign them simply E. He had even shown one to Arthur, laughing. My mom says she's an old family friend, but she's always been kind of strange, Julian had said. The handwriting on the card, it was the same as the one in the box. The signature was E. Arthur felt the world spinning around him. His mother had been a part of this other boy's life, his brother's life, all along. He remembered his own 5th birthday party, the one where his mother had been so distant. He had been so excited about his new toy car. He hadn't noticed that his mother was crying in the kitchen. He had always assumed she was just tired. Now he knew the truth. She was crying because she was mourning the fact that her 2 sons, her 2 beautiful boys, were separated by a lie, a secret so dark it had become her entire world. The rage, the pain, and the overwhelming confusion were almost too much to bear. He wasn't just a son. He was a secret. He was the child of a second, more stable life, born to a man who could provide security. He was the replacement, the lie, the part of his mother's life that was respectable, while the other part, the part with Julian, was the shameful, hidden truth. He looked at the papers again, at the birth certificates and the medical records. There was a section about Julian's adoption. It was a closed adoption, all records sealed. But Rebecca, the social worker, had found a way to work around it, to give his mother a way to keep track of her son. The diary entries were a testament to a mother's fierce, unending love. And now that love, that secret, was his to bear. The revelation was a hammer blow to Arthur's carefully constructed reality. He no longer saw his life as a peaceful stream, but as a river with a hidden, violent undercurrent. The memories of his childhood, once so idyllic, were now tainted. Every time he recalled a fond moment with his mother, a small, dark shadow of Julian lurked at the edges. His mother, the gentle, loving Eleanor, was now a woman of profound contradictions, a matriarch who had built her family on a foundation of a lie. Arthur knew he had to act. He had to find Julian. The need was primal, a force of nature. He wasn't sure what he would say or what he would do when he found him, but he knew he couldn't live with this secret. He couldn't be the keeper of the truth while his brother, this ghost of a sibling, lived his life, possibly unaware of their connection, possibly unaware of the mother who had loved and mourned him from a distance. He started with the obvious. He went to the old garage in the next town over, the one Julian's adoptive father had owned. It was now a chain store, a bright, soulless building with no trace of its past. He asked around, spoke to some of the older residents who still frequented the local diner. He learned that Mr. Harrison had passed away a few years back, and Mrs. Harrison had moved to Florida to live with her sister. Julian, they said, had left town right after high school and had never returned. He was a good kid, they'd say, a little quiet, but a hard worker. The details were frustratingly vague. Arthur's search felt like chasing a ghost. He tried to find old high school yearbooks, but the library had been renovated, and the old archives were scattered or lost. He tried to search online, but a name as common as Julian Harrison yielded thousands of results. He knew he had to find a more personal link, something that only Julian would have. And then he remembered the art, the talent Julian had for drawing. His mother's diary had mentioned it repeatedly. Julian, she wrote, paints his heart out. He was a man of art. He went to the old art supply store in their downtown, a dusty, charming place run by a woman named Martha who had been there forever. She remembered him, of course. She remembered almost everyone who had ever walked through her doors. Arthur asked her about Julian. Martha's eyes lit up. Oh, Julian Harrison. Talent. A truly remarkable talent. He would come in here and just lose himself in the colors. I still have some of his old sketchbooks. He left them here when he went off to art school. Art school. That was the new lead. Martha gave him the name of the prestigious art college in the city, the one Julian had been accepted into. She also gave him a small, worn sketchbook. He left it behind, said he'd come back for it one day. Maybe you can give it to him? Arthur's hands trembled as he held the book. The first page had a dedication. To my mother, for all the inspiration. But it wasn't signed Julian. It was signed J. Arthur drove to the city to the art college. It was a sprawling, chaotic place, a world away from his quiet, suburban life. He found the administrative office and, with a story about being a distant relative trying to reconnect, managed to get a little more information. Julian had indeed graduated from the college with top honors. His senior thesis had been a stunning series of portraits of a quiet, elegant woman with salt and pepper hair. Arthur's heart stopped. The description matched his mother exactly. He went to the college's art gallery, a small, quiet space where they displayed student work, and there it was, a portrait of his mother. It was simply titled E. The eyes in the painting were filled with a profound sadness, a look that Arthur had never seen in his mother's real eyes. The painting was a ghost. It was a testament to the love and the grief that his mother had felt for her hidden son. And the artist's statement next to the painting was a short, poignant paragraph. I have known this woman all my life, though she was always a ghost to me. She was a presence, a quiet guardian, and her love was the most enduring secret I have ever known. This is a tribute to the woman I knew, but could never call my own. The words resonated deep in Arthur's soul. Julian had known. He had always known. He had sensed the secret, the hidden love, and he had carried it with him his entire life. The art was his way of communicating, of reaching out to a mother who could only ever be a phantom. Arthur asked an art student working in the gallery if he knew who the artist was. Julian Harrison? Oh, he's a legend here, the student said, his voice full of admiration. He's a curator now. He's working at the gallery a few blocks over, the one on the corner of Elm and Main. The information was so simple, so direct, that it felt like a miracle. After weeks of dead ends, the universe had finally pointed him in the right direction. He walked out of the gallery, his legs feeling heavy, and made his way to the address. His heart was a drum, beating out a frantic, terrible rhythm. This was it, the moment of truth. He was about to come face to face with a man who was, by all rights, a stranger, but who was also the ghost of his own family, a part of his life he never knew existed. The man who had been loved in secret by the same woman who had loved him out in the open. A man who had his mother's heart, a piece of it that Arthur had never known was missing. He approached the gallery on Elm and Main. It was a modern, minimalist space, a stark contrast to the small, dusty art store where he had started his search. He walked inside, the bell above the door chiming, and a man at the front desk looked up. He was older now, with a few streaks of gray in his dark, curly hair. His face was a little more weathered, but the eyes were the same quiet, introspective eyes that had painted his mother's portrait. "Julian." Arthur's voice was a whisper, a question that held the weight of 60 years of secrets. The man looked at him, his expression blank at first, and then a flicker of something in his eyes, a flicker of recognition, a ghost of a memory. He had never met Arthur, not really, but his mother had shown him so many pictures, told him so many stories. He had known about the boy who was just 2 years younger than him, the boy with the kind face and the laugh that made you want to smile. He had known all along. The silence that followed Arthur's whispered question was a chasm, filled with a lifetime of unspoken words and buried emotions. Julian's eyes, those quiet, searching eyes, fixed on him. There was no shock, no confusion, only a profound, heartbreaking understanding. He knew why Arthur was there. He knew who he was. Julian walked from behind the desk, his movements deliberate and calm. He held out a hand. "I've been waiting for you," he said, his voice low, a little raspy, but with a warmth that instantly disarmed Arthur. "Ever since I found her diary." Arthur's hand trembled as he shook Julian's. You found it too?" Julian nodded, a sad smile playing on his lips. "A year ago, when I was sorting through my mother's things. My adoptive mother, that is. She never got rid of anything. She kept a small box just like the one you probably found. It was full of letters from your mother. My mother." He paused, looking at Arthur with an intensity that felt both alien and deeply familiar. "She wrote to my mother every year, a new letter for every birthday. She would write about you, your report cards, your baseball games, your high school prom. She was always so proud." A fresh wave of grief washed over Arthur. All this time, he had felt as though his mother had been a different woman, but she hadn't. She had simply been a mother divided, her love a silent river flowing in two directions. He had been so loved, so cherished, but he had never known that another boy had received that same love, only in a more clandestine, more heartbreaking way. "I found the birthday cards," Arthur said, his voice catching. "The ones for my birthday. The ones that said, 'He had a happy day too.' Those were for me," Julian said, his eyes now full of tears. "She would send them to my mother, who would then put them on my presents. She didn't want me to ever feel forgotten. It was her way of being there, even when she couldn't." He took a deep breath. "She loved us both, Arthur. I think she always felt guilty for the lie, but she loved us both so much that she couldn't bear to let either of us go." They talked for hours. They went to a small cafe and sat in a quiet corner, talking about their lives. Arthur spoke of his children, his happy marriage, his work as a carpenter. Julian spoke of his art, his quiet life, his career as a curator. He talked about his parents, the Harrisons, with a profound sense of gratitude. "They were wonderful," he said. "They gave me a home, a name, but I always felt like a piece of me was missing, a piece that belonged to someone else." Arthur showed him the old sketchbook. Julian's face lit up as he held it, his fingers tracing the drawings of old houses, trees, and quiet, melancholic landscapes. "I can't believe this survived," he whispered. "I thought it was lost forever." "She saved it," Arthur said, the weight of the words a comfort. "She saved everything." They talked about their mother, Eleanor. They pieced together her life, the two separate threads of her existence now finally braided together. They found out that she had kept a small, almost undetectable fund for Julian, money she had saved from her modest salary, to pay for his art school tuition. She had never spent a dime on herself, choosing instead to invest in the artistic talent of the son she couldn't claim. She had attended his graduation, sitting in the back of the auditorium, a single silent tear running down her cheek. She had come to every one of his art exhibits, anonymously, a ghost in the crowd, a silent admirer. Julian had always felt a presence there, a sense of being watched, of being loved. He had never been able to put a name to it, until now. The conversation wasn't easy. There were moments of anger, of sadness, of deep, raw pain. But there was also a profound sense of relief. The secret was out. The lie was gone. They were no longer two strangers, but two brothers, two halves of a whole, brought together by a forgotten birthday card and the enduring love of a woman who had carried the burden of her choices alone. Arthur looked at Julian, at the man who was so much like him and yet so different. They had the same laugh, the same way of furrowing their brow when they were thinking. They were connected by something deeper than blood, by a shared history they were only just beginning to understand. They left the cafe, promising to see each other again soon. As Arthur drove back home, the landscape seemed different. The world wasn't a place of quiet, simple truths anymore. It was a place of complexity, of hidden depths, of family secrets that could shatter and rebuild a life in the same breath. And as I look at their story, I can't help but think of all the secrets that lie hidden in our own families. The ties that bind us, the love that endures, and the truth that, no matter how deeply buried, will always find a way to surface. Because some connections, some bonds are simply too strong to be forgotten. This is a story of forgotten ties, of a family bound by a secret. If the story resonated with you, if it made you think about the ties in your own life, please consider giving this video a like. And if you want to hear more stories like this, more stories of the strange and the heartbreaking, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Because here at Forgotten Ties, we believe that every secret, no matter how small, is a story waiting to be told.